The Churches of Christ appear to have jumped on this beginning in 1918 at the University of Texas. It was under the control of Abilene Christian College, which is now Abilene Christian University. Abilene was a junior college at the time, and so they're not offering a bachelor's degree or anything like that. So if somebody wanted a bachelor's degree, they'd have to go to the University of Texas or someplace like that. The University of Texas eventually would allow 2 credits to be applied towards the bachelor's there by taking courses under the Bible chair. Eventually, a lot of these Bible chairs, as universities began to be able to teach religion in the later part of the 20th century, the Bible chair movement really declined because there was not the need for it, and there was not really a place for it. And so that's where you kind of see this movement morph from the academic focus into a more campus ministry type of thing. And so you see this campus ministries at the variety of these universities today. You also see the development of what are known as disciples' divinity houses. One at the University of Chicago and one at Vanderbilt that are still present, still active. Essentially, these were houses connected with the graduate schools of these 2 institutions, University of Chicago and Vanderbilt, that provided housing, financial aid, some instruction, but they did not grant degrees. So if you were a member of the Disciples of Christ and were going to study at University of Chicago or going to study at Vanderbilt, you can maybe get housing at one of these places, or maybe even some financial aid as a student from the Disciples of Christ. Not surprisingly, of course, there was some opposition related to the colleges as well. And I did not I didn't flesh that out in my slides. So let's talk about opposition to the colleges. I'll give you everything on that one slide instead of breaking it down. So as these colleges develop, there is opposition from the conservative wing of the Restoration movement and into the 20th century. Benjamin Franklin, for example, was one of those who was opposed to education for ministers. Remember, as the Restoration movement develops, one of the things that's kind of a part of this is this concern of this elite clerical class, the educated clergy, and how they treat the common Christian. So there had been kind of this concern. But a lot of members of the Restoration movement also felt that ministers should be educated to some extent. But throughout the 19th century, as these splits, these cracks are developing, one of those was this kind of lower class, upper class kind of crack, where a lot of the people going to colleges like Bethany and others for ministerial training are kind of adopting these kind of middle class or upper class prejudices and are wanting to be paid what a lot of the lower class people feel are these huge salaries, etc. After Franklin's death, one of the major opponents of colleges was a man named Daniel Summer. Summer was born in 1850 in Maryland to Methodist parents, but eventually becomes part of the Restoration movement, attends Bethany College, but this is after Alexander Campbell has died. But eventually he's kind of drawn to the thinking of Benjamin Franklin. So even though he's educated at college, he's still kind of influenced by a lot of things that Franklin is saying. Eventually will become a writer for the American Christian Review, which was Franklin's journal. He begins preaching in a variety of places, including Indianapolis. And it kind of represents this unusual aspect, right? The churches of Christ tend to be southern and rural. Summer is representative of this urban, northern, midwestern aspect of the churches of Christ, so he's kind of unique compared to other people at the time. When Franklin dies, there are a variety of people that eventually are owners of the American Christian Review, kind of changes hands a couple times, eventually ends up Summer is in control of it. Regains some of its prominence under it, and really gets involved in this kind of debating type of approach, debating people outside the churches of Christ, some within the movement. In 1889, Sumner will participate in writing what's known as the Address and Declaration. If you remember, Thomas Campbell had written Declaration and Address as a call towards unity, separation from denominationalism. Sumner's Address and Declaration is a work that called for people to separate from congregations that supported instrumental music and missionary societies. Those that supported those things, in Sumner's view, were not to be considered fellow Christians. They kind of abandoned the faith. So he becomes really focused on this idea of the need for plain talking. So Christ and the apostles were plain, so was the gospel. There was not a need for training in rhetoric. There was not a need for any sort of advanced education, even though they had some, to preach the gospel. Those things were unnecessary. And so he's kind of trying to support, even though he's urban, Midwestern, he's very supportive of the rural agrarian type of lifestyle. That's the ideal. Yes. In fact, he said that there were some students at Bethany who were interested in the gospel, and others were too modern. And so his concern is that a lot of the ministers being produced by colleges like this are not interested in the gospel. And colleges did not support, he claimed, preachers interested in the restoration of ancient Christianity. So there's this kind of struggle between these older, uneducated ministers and these newer, educated preachers that have been educated in modern colleges. And Sumner and others feel that these newer preachers are kind of too full of themselves. And then finally, this opposition is also focused on, here are these colleges that are not under the oversight of an eldership. They are extra-congregational types of organizations, and so they're actually, in their minds, usurping the roles and power of the local congregations. So on the one hand, you have represented in Sumner, in the Sumnerite wing of Churches of Christ, this opposition to colleges because of the sociological output in this kind of class struggle. You also have this concern of, here these colleges operating outside of the local congregation, sometimes supplanting the work of the local congregation. And so there's concern about that aspect. On the other hand, there were others that were different than Sumner. They're still opposed to colleges, but they come from a different perspective. Their concern is, can a congregation financially support a college? Now, the question is not so much individuals supporting a college, providing financial support, right? Giving to a college. The question becomes, can a congregation out of the church treasury take funds that have been collected from that congregation and use it to support a college which is not a congregation, which is actually outside the local church? Now, Sumner's influence is mostly Midwest. This second group, the group that is concerned about congregational support, is largely people in Texas and Tennessee. They do share some of Sumner's concerns of educated ministers kind of thinking themselves better than their congregations. But their greater concern is this idea of financial support and if it's okay to take money from the church and use it for these colleges. Largely for a lot of the opponents, colleges, even though they were Christian colleges, were doing secular work. They were educational institutions. They were not the church. So, and especially as some of these institutions turn into baccalaureate degree granting institutions, where you're not getting a degree in Bible, you're getting a degree in something else. Right? And so you're going there as a Christian school, but it's not, and you're studying the Bible, but you're not getting a degree in Bible. Right? You're not going into preaching. You're going into some other kind of thing. So as that starts happening, it's very much more this is a secular work. So can a church take funds gathered by the church, can it take those funds and give it to an institution that is largely secular? Now, most support throughout the 19th century into the 20th century for colleges have come from individuals. But in the 20th century, there is more of a concerted effort from the standpoint of the colleges themselves to try and gain support from churches for colleges. Right? So there's these kind of fundraising drives that are being done by colleges to try and raise money. One of the most vocal supporters of congregations supporting colleges was G.C. Brewer. So Summer was against colleges, Brewer was for colleges, and was for congregational support of colleges. So, Brewer is the one that really promotes the idea that churches can take money out of the church treasury and give it to a Christian college. Brewer was born in Tennessee to Baptist parents, eventually baptized into a Church of Christ. He begins debating and preaching shortly after his baptism and will continue that through the rest of his life. He will attend the Nashville Bible School, and in this kind of early 20th century, mid-20th century period, becomes very prominent in promoting several things that we would call institutionalism. The idea of a located preacher. We've talked about how that had kind of been an issue in the 19th century, and the Churches of Christ have largely been opposed to the idea of located preachers. Well, I don't have the year on him yet, but sometime in the late 19th century. So Brewer is very supportive of this idea of located preachers. He's very supportive of the idea of trying to build large congregations, as opposed to these small congregations that are kind of dotting the landscape.